Recall that we're talking about the lines of defense. The innate immune system had the first and second lines of defense. We covered the first line of defense. Then we started the second line of defense with the antimicrobial proteins. Let's continue then with the antimicrobial cells, and you've seen some of these before. So natural killer cells, remember, state your name, last name first, killer, natural. They do immune surveillance. So what they do is they wander through your body and they kill bad guys. And how do they know where the bad guys are? Well, they look for things that are attached to antibodies. And anything that's attached to the antibody, they release what are called perforins and granzymes. So perforins perforate the cell membrane, and granzymes induce cell apoptosis. So basically, I mean, that's so cool. They don't actually kill bad guys. They convince the bad guys to kill themselves. Damn, that is sophisticated. That's what natural killer cells do, all right? Then the macrophages. Neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils. They are the ones who are out there eating up bad guys, macrophages eating a few at a time. Then the macrophages, that's what the monocytes turned into. Most lymphocytes are involved in the specific defense mechanism, specific or adaptive. So in other words, the T and the B cells, the T and the B lymphocytes, which make up 95% of your lymphocytes, they're not involved in the second line of defense. They're involved in the third line of defense, the specific or adaptive immune system. It's only the natural killer cells. They're really the only lymphocytes involved in this second line of defense. So here you see natural killer cell finds the infected or the enemy cell, releases the perforins, they poke holes in the granzymes, that causes the enemy cell to undergo apoptosis. And then look, here comes a macrophage, which can see, look at the size of the natural killer cell compared to the enemy cell. Look at the size of the macrophage compared. Remember I said macrophages, the monocytes after diapedesis, they like morph into giant werewolves. They're like 5 times larger. So macrophages are these monstrously huge cells, and they can eat lots of bad guys, okay? So I say basically natural killer cells are like your body's, they're your body's ninja, right? Ninjas, notice, what does it say? Guns don't kill people, ninjas kill people, all right? So natural killer cells. Man, so glad you got those. They are out there wandering through the fluids of your body, finding anything attached to an antibody, and then causing it to kill itself. Okay. Your body's ECF ninja. Let's then take a quick look at the individual white blood cells. We've seen these before. I just want to say a few more things about them now. So neutrophils. Most abundant of the macrophages, all right? First to arrive, usually first to die. Remember I mentioned before, neutrophils are like really stupid soldiers with incredibly powerful weapons. They show up at the site of the infection, and they just point the weapons in every direction and start firing, and they kill everything. They kill the bad guys, they kill themselves, they kill the good guys. I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Fifth Element with Lilu, Bruce Willis. There were these really stupid aliens. I'm saying neutrophils are like the really stupid aliens in that movie. First to arrive, usually the first to die. They kill everything there. They specialize in killing bacteria. They are the bacteria specialists. Phagocytosis, usually only a few at a time. Then they have what's called the respiratory burst. Remember, they are granulocytes. They have granules. Well, respiratory burst is the degranulation. That's when the granules burst open and they release all these chemicals. They release superoxide anions, free radicals, as they're sometimes called, and those are very destructive. They release hydrogen peroxide, and they release the hypochlorite ion. That's OCl-. You have some hypochlorite ion in your house, I'll bet, maybe in the laundry room area of your house. That's bleach. So they actually release those, and yeah, those are incredibly toxic. They'll kill the bad guys, they'll also kill any healthy cells, and they'll also kill the neutrophils themselves. But it doesn't matter. If you got an infection, your body's way of dealing with it is just kill everything that's there. And, you know, we can always make more of our own things later. Let's just kill everything. So efficient they kill just about everything in the vicinity, including themselves, including our own body cells, all right? Really stupid soldiers with really powerful weapons, okay? Then the eosinophils, weak but useful phagocytes, respond to antigen-antibody complexes. So once again, like the natural killer cells, they look for anything that's connected to an antibody and then they kill it, all right? So there you see a helminth worm down in the lower left, and notice the little green Ys, those are antibodies. So the eosinophils wander through your fluids, and whenever they find an antibody, whatever is connected to that antibody, they kill it, all right? So they surround much bigger parasites. Things like parasitic worms are too big to swallow. Even a macrophage can't swallow a parasitic worm. They can be too big. So the eosinophils instead swarm the bad guys and kill them from the outside. So things like roundworms, tapeworms, and so on. They produce superoxide ions again, also hydrogen peroxide. They also produce neurotoxins. Because remember, these are not just cells, these are actual creatures, these parasitic worms. So that actually they have a nervous system. And so the eosinophils secrete neurotoxins that actually kill organisms. They also stimulate mast cells and basophils to degranulate, releasing histamine, but then they secrete the enzyme histaminase to limit the allergic and inflammatory responses. So eosinophils also help. We said before that the basophils are involved in the inflammation. Well, eosinophils also are involved. Mast cells are a sort of a white blood cell, all right? They come from the same stem cell line, but we don't consider them to be really white blood cells. They're cells that are found throughout the connective tissues of your body, and mostly what they're for is for releasing histamine, and the basophils as well. So you release the histamine, but then you don't want it to become overactive, so histaminase is an enzyme that breaks down histamine. That's another way of homeostasis. You know, release a chemical that's going to do something, but at the same time release a chemical that's going to break it down. Kind of like with blood clotting, you know, how thrombin both promoted the formation of fibrin to form the clot, but then thrombin also promoted the formation of plasmin to break the clot down, okay? It's kind of like, you know, you're going to have to do it all eventually, so everybody work together. And there you see, it's really cool. There's a tapeworm in the lower right, shows how infected pigs carry it, and then infected pork, you get the cysts. One way to get it is with Sonoran hot dogs. They've actually found that. Sonoran hot dogs, people getting tapeworm from Sonoran hot dogs. Generally speaking, that isn't the case, but it does happen. I had a former student working in ER who one night sent me a text going, "Tom, look at this." And he sent me CT, I guess, of a person who came in and they had tapeworm cysts all through their brain. So don't mess with tapeworms, you guys. Bad stuff. All right, basophils, talked about those before. They help the other white blood cells. They release histamine, a vasodilator. Also release heparin, because if you're going to make blood flow to the area, you don't want spurious blood clots. So therefore, you also release heparin. Again, a homeostatic mechanism to make sure that you don't produce undesirable effects, okay? What other cell releases histamine and heparin? Those are the mast cells, all right? Shows in the lower right. So both basophils and mast cells release histamine, heparin, histaminase. These are the ones that we'll see coming up can be the troublemakers. The basophils have IgEs on them, all right? IgE is the troublemaker. We'll talk about that later. But what happens is sometimes they become overactive and they release way too much histamine. And remember back from the cardiovascular system when we studied that? Too much histamine causes way too much vasodilation. What happens if you have way too much vasodilation? Well, you're going to lower peripheral vascular resistance. That's going to lower blood pressure, and your blood pressure crashes, and you go into cardiovascular or circulatory shock. The organs of your body are not getting enough blood, and that's potentially fatal. Right? Anaphylaxis is a potentially fatal overreaction of your immune system. That's why people carry EpiPens, remember? So basophils, you know, they help, but sometimes they're the ones who kind of go a little bit out of control, all right? Then monocytes, macrophages. So remember, monocytes emigrate from the blood into the tissue spaces to become macrophages. They enlarge to like 5 times their normal size. Diapedesis, and then positive chemotaxis. They sniff out the bad guys. They're not the first to arrive. Remember who was the first to arrive? Neutrophils, the dumb soldiers with powerful weapons who kill everything. Then, like 8 to 12 hours later, the macrophages arrive, and what they do is they basically clean everything up. They eat all the dead bodies. They eat the dead pathogens. They eat dead bacteria. They eat your own body's dead cells. They eat the dead neutrophils. Any of cells of your own body that the neutrophils killed, they eat those. So, it's kind of like, remember, the immune system is like there's a giant battlefield inside your body. And the battlefield is going to be littered with corpses and, rifles and helmets and, all kinds of junk left behind. Macrophages just come in and clean it all up, okay? Just clean up the entire mess. So you have fixed macrophages. These are macrophages that basically go to one place and they stay there. You have what are called Kupffer cells in the liver. Why in the liver? Well, remember the liver can take up as the backup site for recycling blood cells. Plus the hepatic portal vein coming into the liver, there may still potentially be pathogens from the intestines and so on. So you've got a bunch of macrophages just stay put in the liver, waiting for any bad guys who manage to make it there. You have what are called alveolar or alveolar dust cells in the lungs, down your alveoli, the little sacs at the bottom of your lungs. Think about it. When you breathe in, you can breathe in pathogens. Hopefully they get trapped by one of the malt brothers. Remember the malt brothers? Malt and Galt, malt, Galt, malt and Galt, malt, the malt brothers. So if they don't get trapped by the malt brothers, then when they get down to the very bottom of your lung, there are the alveolar dust cells, which are macrophages waiting for them, all right? Your body's got so many backup systems. It's so cool. Likewise in the spleen, in that white pulp, also in the lymph nodes, also in the red bone marrow. Any place where pathogens might conceivably show up, you got macrophages who just stay put. They just wait for bad guys in places where bad guys are more likely to show. And you also then have wandering macrophages, kind of like the way natural killer cells did. They just wander through the fluids of your body, looking for bad guys. There you see, looking for trouble. Looking for trouble, look no further. So you got 2 wandering macrophages down there in the lower right corner. Wandering macrophages looking for trouble. Just wandering through your body fluids, looking for bad guys and killing them, okay? There's a couple of wandering macrophages right there. Those are my friends. That's Fanny Galore on the left and Ida Tapper on the right. They're burlesque dancers. Tucson have a thriving burlesque community before the pandemic. I hope it comes back. Burlesque is a lot of fun. It's a form of theater. There are costumes and music. It's like dance. It's really cool. There's no actual nudity. No, it's just pasties and a G-string. But those women are incredibly accomplished. They're very smart. One of them's a faculty member at the U of A. Another one's a nurse. Very smart, very accomplished people. They just really enjoy taking their clothes off in front of an audience. And that's fine because this is America and you can do that. So antigen-presenting cells. We've mentioned these before. Let's talk about them now. Antigen-presenting cells. What they do is they eat the pathogen. So there you see in the upper left-hand corner, there's the antigen, all right? So they don't usually eat the whole pathogen. They usually just eat the antigen. We'll talk more about that. And then what happens is they digest it and they spit out most of it, but they take a little part of it and insert it into a little display case on the surface of the cell. It's called an MHC2 protein, all right? And they display what's called the epitope, which is the actual, it's called the antigenic determinant. It's the part of the antigen that makes every antigen different from every other antigen. So this is what happens. Antigen-presenting cells, remember who some of them were? Dendritic cells, and also macrophages, and also B lymphocytes. All of those. When they eat a bad guy, they then show part of that bad guy. They put it up on the surface, and therefore other immune cells can go, oh my God, we've been invaded by hepatitis, or measles, or strep throat, or whatever. See, whatever the invader was, is now going to get displayed by the antigen-presenting cell to the whole rest of your immune system. So again, like a Paul Revere thing, mobilize everybody. When we were in the classroom, I normally, on the way to Pima on days when I teach, I stop at the bagel place and get a bagel. That's my breakfast. And so on days when I'm going to teach, I eat all the bagel except a little part of it. And when we get to this part of the class, I put that little piece of bagel on my shoulder. And I say to the class, I say, take a close look. What did I have for breakfast? And they go, a bagel. I go, yeah, all right. See, I'm an APC. That would be the epitope, all right? I'm showing you. You guys are all white blood cells. So now, thanks to me, the APC, you guys all know that I had a bagel for breakfast. You guys all know that I was invaded by the body's been invaded by a particular pathogen, and I'm showing you which one that is. So that's like that guy there wearing a suit with bananas and waffles, and I don't know what's going on there, and I don't need to know. Okay, continuing with the second line of defense, let's talk about pyrexia, the fancy name for fever, and yes, you have to know both. Remember, you own any Pyrex? Pyrex is that stuff that you can actually, put in the oven and it'll still be just fine. So yeah, Pyrex. Temperature, fever. So fever is an abnormal elevation of body temp from many different causes. Fever is a generalized response to a lot of disease states, okay? So, for example, exogenous pyrogens. Pyrogen. Pyro, root word, means fire. Like, did you guys ever watch that, know that group? Porno for Pyros? Perry Farrell, formerly of Jane's Addiction. Well, you're way too young. Anyway, pyrogen, create. So pyrogen is something that creates fire. In other words, creates fever. Exogenous, so for example, some bacteria secrete things that cause you to have a fever. They secrete these endotoxins, which then, once they get out into your body, they become exogenous pyrogens. They will cause your body to have a fever, all right? You also have endogenous pyrogens. So your own neutrophils and macrophils also secrete pyrogens when they eat bacteria. So see, isn't that cool? Both the bad guys and your own good guys, in a state of infection, they will both be releasing pyrogens, which will then go to your hypothalamus and cause you to have a fever, all right? So they communicate things like IL-1 and IL-6, those interleukins. Those are pyrogens. Those will stimulate fever. Tumor necrosis factor alpha, that will also stimulate fever. These are cytokines that are normally released by white blood cells in response to an infection, all right? Pyrogens stimulate the hypothalamus via the release of prostaglandins to raise the set point for your body temperature, all right? So you see, your body normally is at what? What's the normal body temperature for humans? 37 Celsius. So your hypothalamus tries to maintain that. It's what's called a set point. Your hypothalamus constantly monitors your body temperature, and your hypothalamus does things to try to keep bringing you back to the set point. So like normally, if you start to get too cold, what does the hypothalamus make you do? Makes you shiver. If you are getting too warm, what does the hypothalamus do? Makes you sweat. So see, the hypothalamus monitors your set point, and if your body temperature goes too high or too low, it'll start causing you to shiver or to sweat in order to bring yourself back to the set point. Well, what the pyrogens do is they cause the hypothalamus to change the set point. So instead of being 37, the hypothalamus now temporarily changes the set point to a higher value so that now it will force you to maintain a higher body temperature, all right? So how do aspirin and NSAIDs decrease fever? Did we talk about that already? I don't remember anymore. I think we talked about that in the blood PowerPoints, all right? What they do is they are prostaglandin inhibitors. So prostaglandins are the things released by the hypothalamus, and so they inhibit prostaglandins. That's how they reduce fever. Prostaglandins are also involved in creating inflammation and creating pain. So that's why when you take aspirin and the NSAIDs, NSAID is non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. Those will also be like naproxen and like ibuprofen, all right, and aspirin. Tylenol is not, acetaminophen is not an NSAID, but those three are aspirin, naproxen, ibuprofen. They all work on prostaglandins, and so what that does is it causes, it's going to help you then. It's going to help bring down fever. It's going to help reduce pain, and it's going to help reduce inflammation. Now, generally speaking, it's not really clear that you want to do that unless things get really bad. I mean, normally when I get sick, like if I get sick with my second vaccine inoculation, I'm probably not going to take those because, frankly, those are helping your body get better faster, all right? You can take the aspirin, the NSAIDs, to reduce your temporary discomfort, but it take you longer to get better if you do that, all right? Something to consider. So here you see these are the 3 parts of fever. So pyrogens stimulate the anterior hypothalamus to release prostaglandin E, PGE. PGE increases the hypothalamic set point, all right? So now, instead of trying to maintain your body temperature at 37, your hypothalamus is going to do everything it can to keep you now at 39, all right? In other words, as long as you got an infection, there are going to be these pyrogens from the bacteria and also from your own white blood cells. So those pyrogens are going to be out there. As long as the infection is there, it's going to keep producing the prostaglandins, and that's going to keep causing your hypothalamus to keep your set point up at 39, okay? And so notice the 3 phases. You have, first you're at normal body temperature, then you have what's called onset, and then stadium. Stadium is where your hypothalamus is now maintaining you at 39. It's intentionally going to keep you at 39 until all the prostaglandins, like PGE, go away. And then after that happens, you have defervescence, and that's where your body temperature returns to normal. So have you ever noticed what happens when you first get a fever, when the fever is first coming on? Remember, you get the chills, and you start shivering. How about that? What does shivering do? Shivering, you're doing lots of skeletal muscle contraction. That means you're having to make lots of ATP. Therefore, you're creating lots of heat as a byproduct. And by golly, that's how your hypothalamus brings your body temperature up. You feel the chills and you shiver, and that causes your body temperature to go from 37 up to 39. And then notice how if you've been sick, like for a week or whatever, with the flu or whatever, there'll be one night where, you wake up in the middle of the night and the sheets are all soaking wet. You've been sweating like crazy. They say you've broken the fever. You've sweated it out. Well, actually what's going on there is you basically have won the battle. You've defeated the infection, so all the pyrogens are not getting released anymore. Therefore, the prostaglandins are not getting released. Therefore, your hypothalamus is no longer going to try to maintain you at 39. So how the heck is your hypothalamus going to be able to bring you back to normal? Yeah, by sweating. See? Isn't that cool? Now you know why you get the chills and you shiver when the fever starts and why you sweat when the fever is over. That's the way your hypothalamus changes your body temperature. Why do you shiver during onset and sweat during defervescence? We just talked that through. Now, why fever? Is that good? Well, generally, yeah. Generally speaking, fever is good. Intensifies the effects of interferons. It enhances phagocytosis. It increases the activity of your lymphocytes. It elevates your metabolic rate, which accelerates tissue repair. And it causes the liver and the spleen to sequester iron, zinc, and copper, which is what bacteria need to replicate. So damn, look at that. Fever is actually doing good things for you. That's why, generally speaking, if you've only got a low-grade fever, let it run. It's helping you. It's helping you get better, all right? And it will kill or inhibit the growth of some microbes, although there are some that enjoy the heat. So that one's kind of a wash. But overall, low-grade fever is a good deal, all right? Let it run. Most of my students who are nurses or who work in hospitals say that, the rule of thumb is, there are always exceptions, but sort of the rule of thumb is as long as it's under 102, let it go. Once it gets to 102, now there's potential trouble. That's when you go ahead and take the Tylenol or whatever. But up to 102, let the fever run. It's trying to help you. Your body is trying to help you get better, for God's sakes. Let it do its job, all right? Now, high fever, now this is trouble, all right? High fever is potential trouble. Proteins will denature at high temps, including enzymes. So remember, most of the work in your body is done by enzymes. If your body temperature gets too high, those enzymes are going to stop working, which means you stop working. And now we're in big trouble. Proteins and cell membranes can also coagulate. That's not good. Nerve damage starts at 41 Celsius, which is 105.8. That's why oftentimes they sort of put 105 as the magic number. At 105, you start thinking about taking emergency steps to lower the fever. When I was a little kid one time, I got a really bad fever. Little kids, always getting sick. I got who knows what. My immune system was fighting it off. But my fever hit 105. My dad was a physician, and when my fever hit 105, that was it. He went into the bathroom, ran the bath water, ran a tub full of cold water, and took me and stuck me in the bathtub. And not only that, but my mom, this is back in the days when they didn't have ice makers and refrigerators. You had these little plastic trays that you filled with water and put them in the freezer, and then you froze them. So my mom went up and down the hallway of the apartment complex where we lived, and she asked neighbors for ice. And so she ended up with like a whole bucket full of ice cubes. She brought those into the bathroom and dumped those into the bathtub. There I was in a bathtub full of cold water, and now I had a whole bucket of ice cubes dumped in there. My dad was holding me down. That's when my parents, by the way, learned that I knew a whole bunch of words that they didn't think I knew. Because, damn, that was a very unpleasant experience. But my dad was trying to save my life. He was trying to save me from like permanent nerve damage by keeping my fever down below 105. Once you get to 103, you're now in danger of heat stroke. 105, you can become delirious, convulsions, coma. 110, yeah. When your fever hits 110, there's a special word we use for you. We call you pot roast. All right, that's what you are when you hit 110. That's bye. Sorry. Upper right, by the way, what is that? That's a Brazilian dance company named Fever. That's what happens when you do Google image search for fever. And the bottom, by the way, that's Cuddy from House. There was a House episode, and I binge watched all 8 seasons, just because House was so hilarious. But there was an episode where a kid had an incredibly high fever, and they couldn't bring it down, and by God, Cuddy grabbed the kid, went into the shower, turned on the shower, and of course they saved the kid's life. It's TV. Here you go. Here's something to do. When you have an I hate my job day, all right, try this out. Stop at your pharmacy, go to the thermometer section, purchase a rectal thermometer made by Johnson & Johnson. Be very sure you got this brand. When you get home, lock your doors, draw the curtains, disconnect the phone so you won't be disturbed. Put your phone in airplane mode. Change into comfortable clothing, sit in your favorite chair, open the package and remove the thermometer. Then carefully place it on a table or a surface so that it will not become chipped or broken. Now the fun part begins. Take out the literature from the box and read it carefully. You will notice that in small print there is a statement. Every rectal thermometer made by Johnson & Johnson is personally tested and then sanitized. Now close your eyes and repeat out loud 5 times. I am so glad I do not work in the thermometer quality control department at Johnson & Johnson. Yeah, that would be a shitty job.